joining us tonight on another episode of The Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters, and I am your host for another fabulous little half hour where we are going to talk all things motorsports, because we just had the Daytona 500 last weekend, the kickoff to the NASCAR Cup Series season. And in addition to that, we also had the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race, the Craftsman Truck Series race, the Arca Menard Series race. And it wasn't just that. There were multiple other races going on outside of Daytona on other parts of the world. Formula E was holding a double header in Jeddah, while the Bathurst 12 hours was going on down under in Australia. So we'll talk about all of those races coming up here in the next half hour. But before we do that, please be sure, if you like this show, to go ahead and follow me on social media. You can do so by looking up at rpeeters33. That's RPEETERS 33. And then make sure, as always, you have that little handy dandy WTHR Plus app installed in your smart TV so that you get brand new episodes of the Racing Report each and every week that they are posted. You don't want to miss a single episode, because we cover all of the latest news and notes in the world of racing, and we're recapping and previewing last week's races and the upcoming races this weekend. So let's go ahead without further ado and jump into our news portion of the show. And we'll start off, as always, in the world of Formula One, because we have a bit of an update to a story we brought you last week regarding the compression ratio controversy. So the FIA has now proposed a new approach to testing compression ratio limits, and has asked the F1 power unit manufacturers to vote on whether or not to approve a mid-season change. Now, to catch you up in case you missed last week's show, these new rules with compression ratios say that the fuel/air mixture in the cylinder must have a 16:1 ratio, which is down from the 18:1 ratio in previous years. Now, the Mercedes engine specifically appears to have found a way to increase that ratio through cylinder head design when the power unit is running hot. So it's not inherently an illegal design, it's more of a loophole, but the other teams are not exactly happy about it. So the FIA has proposed a vote. Now, if approved, the change would begin after the summer break. So this change would not take place right away. It would be several months until those regulations went into place. And additionally, those results of the vote are expected within the next 10 days. And that's according to the FIA. Now, also, it's important to note that any change still needs to be approved by the World Motorsports Council. So there's a little update to you there on the F1 compression ratio controversy. Obviously, Mercedes and Toto Wolff aren't exactly happy about it, but they're just going to take it, because what are you going to do? Their loophole got found out, and it's probably getting closed. Sometimes that's just racing. But meanwhile, in the world of Formula One, we had some pretty big news on the schedule front, knowing that now that the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya will remain on the F1 calendar through the 2032 season. However, it will rotate with Spa-Francorchamps. So we talked about last year during an episode of the Racing Report that Spa was going to start rotating and would not be on every single F1 calendar. So now we know that Spa-Francorchamps will host an F1 Grand Prix this year, next year, but then it won't host one in 2028. It will return to hosting one in 2029, won't host one in 2030, and then will return to hosting one in 2031. Now, Barcelona, on the other hand, they will host F1 Grand Prix in 2026, but won't host one next year, will return to hosting it in 2028, won't host one in 2029, will host one in 2030, and then again in 2032. So some big news there if you're looking for that. Obviously, it's a bit of a disappointment to longtime F1 fans who likely are like me and really are disappointed to see the potential of an F1 calendar not include Spa-Francorchamps. I mean, it's one of the best races all year, and it's very disappointing to see, but we'll have to see what happens there. I'm hearing, according to rumors, that the progression on the Mad Ring construction that will replace the Spanish Grand Prix, Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya as the Spanish Grand Prix host, is apparently hitting a couple of snags when it comes to construction, so we'll monitor that. Meanwhile, in the world of Formula One, Audi has named former F2 race winner Ralph Boschung as its development driver. Note, it's not going to be a reserve driver. He is merely a development driver, mainly doing simulator work. But still, good news for Ralph Boschung, who previously said he was probably going to retire and was done, but now he gets to work with the Audi F1 team. Also, some interesting news coming out of the Formula One world is that Petronas, which basically is the fuel supplier for all of the Mercedes teams, reportedly has yet to obtain certification and homologation for its sustainable fuel that those Mercedes-powered teams are expected to use in F1 this season. Now, if the fuel is not approved by the Melbourne race, the Australian Grand Prix, Mercedes, McLaren, Williams, and Alpine could be forced to use a temporary fuel. Now, this is because these new F1 cars, they are specifically going to run on completely sustainable fuels, and they require additional approval by a specific company and an organization before they can be used in race conditions. And so far, Petronas is in a race against the clock to get that approved, so we'll have to see what happens there on that front in a week's time. But the final piece of Formula news today is we'll talk about the F1 TV has officially launched in the United States on Apple TV. Now, F1 TV did previously exist, but now in order to access it in the United States, you have to have access to Apple TV. But once you buy a month of Apple TV, you can link your account with F1 TV and you'll get just the same access that you had when F1 TV was a standalone app. It's just now going to be integrated with Apple TV. And also, I just tested it out on my own personal little iPhone here, and it looks like you have to still have the F1 TV app installed and then just connect your Apple TV credentials with the F1 TV app. So just heads up there if you're trying to figure out how to watch Bahrain preseason testing or when you're getting ready to watch the Australian Grand Prix here in a couple of weeks. But that is it for Formula One news. Let's go ahead quickly and move on into the world of IndyCar, because Honda is reportedly in talks with Meyer-Shank Racing to field the single car factory entry in 2028. Now, we talked about that last week, how IndyCar has basically given charters to Chevrolet and Honda for potential factory-owned teams and cars to run in the series, and it looks like Honda's working now with Meyer-Shank on getting something ready for that in 2028. But Dale Coyne apparently says he wants to be a part of that as well, but Honda kind of put those rumors to rest and said, no, we're probably going to be working with Meyer-Shank. But Dale Coyne still says he would like to be, quote, in the game for that entry. Meanwhile, more news on Prema. Racer is reporting now that they're expected to miss the first 4 races of the IndyCar season, which is not really new news. We already knew that, but now it seems more and more likely that that's going to happen. They might not even be on the grid until the Long Beach Grand Prix coming up in April. Not looking good for them to appear in St. Petersburg here in a couple of weeks' time. Meanwhile, though, a driver that will be on the grid in St. Petersburg is Roman Grosjean, as he has announced that he will drive the full season for Dale Coyne Racing in the number 18 Honda, marking his return to the team where he started in IndyCar in 2021 after leaving Formula One after about 8 seasons. And so good news for Grosjean. He's going to run the full season with Dale Coyne. And penultimately, some IndyCar news here is that the series will once again mandate 2 stints on alternate tires this season, but instead of being on select road race courses, it's going to be only on street races. So the only time the teams will be mandated to run at least 2 stints on the alternate tire will be on the 6 street races on the IndyCar calendar. So at the very least, we're going to see that this in a couple of weeks' time at St. Petersburg. But just important to note there, seeing as they tried it last year and it seemed to have worked well enough for them, even though most drivers and teams said it didn't really play a difference into how the strategy played out. But I digress. IndyCar is still moving forward with this. Finally, though, Racer is now reporting that Team Penske and AJ Foyt will continue their technical alliance through the 2027 season. So that is it for IndyCar news. Let's move on real quickly to Formula E before we have to take our first break. Formula E says this year's Tokyo E-Prix will be a doubleheader run under the lights on July 23rd through the 26th. So that was already announced as being a doubleheader, but now we know that those races will take place under the lights, so something to keep in mind there. And when I say that, I mean the races are expected to go green. Lights out is expected at 8 p.m. local time, which is 6 a.m. Eastern time. So if you're over here on the East Coast, it's going to be a very early morning in July if you want to watch the Tokyo E-Prix doubleheader, which will now be under the lights. Meanwhile, Formula E says it is exploring plans to run an extended configuration of the Jeddah-Corniche circuit for next season in anticipation of the much faster Gen 4 chassis. Now, it's important to note that the series says it's unlikely that they'll use the full Formula 1 circuit, but it likely will incorporate some of those fast winding turns that we've come to find on the Formula 1 calendar with that circuit. So something to keep in mind there. And then finally, let's talk about some of the fallout from this weekend's races. Cooper Kiro and Formula E rookie Pepe Marti has apologized for saying a derogatory slur over the radio after clashing with teammate Dan Ticktum this weekend at the end of Saturday's race in Jeddah. Now, the two teams have agreed to bury the hatchet and move on, and it's unclear right now if Marty will face any kind of penalty for uttering the slur over the radio, but as of right now, it doesn't seem that Formula E is going to be fining him or penalizing him in any way, but it is important to note that he has apologized for that incident. So that is it for our first segment of the show, but don't go anywhere, because after the commercial break, we're going to break down the news and notes in the world of Supercars and NASCAR, and there's a lot to talk about there as the Supercars season kicks off this weekend in Sydney. So, more Racing Report coming up after these messages. And welcome back to the Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. Thanks so much for sticking with us through that break. Let's go ahead and get down and dirty into the world of Supercars, because the Sydney 500 is this weekend for the series, the first and opening round. A lot of things going in. Obviously, we talked about last week. We're going to have a new broadcast going on, lots of new things. But let's talk about the test that's been going on this week in Sydney. Will Brown paced the opening test at Sydney Motorsports Park, while the 5 new Toyota Supras were at the bottom of the timing charts. Now, again, it's just testing. Anything could happen. This could be very different. Who knows? But it is important to see that it's not a very good opening test when it comes to stacking up against the other teams. Now, Chaz Mostert, who, by the way, is in a Supra this year, the defending champion, was 16th quickest. But that was the fastest time posted by any Supra in that first test. Now, of course, as of the recording of this episode, the second test has not yet been done, so I don't know what happened then, but I can tell you it might be a steep curve for those Toyotas coming up this weekend at Sydney. We'll just have to watch. But hey, when you're watching this weekend's races in Sydney, you might notice a new safety car being used. That's because Supercars has unveiled that a new safety car for the 2026 season. It will be a Subaru WRX, which will replace the Porsche that previously paced the field. And instead of being the BP Ultimate Safety Car, which it's been branded as, it will now have branding from Shannon's National. So Shannon's International, excuse me, I should have got that. Shannon's International will be, so it's still going to be a green car, but it's not going to be bright green and lime green like the BP car was. Now let's talk about some co-driver news. Bailey Hall will partner Craig Lowndes as his co-driver for the Team 18 wildcard entry in 2026. Jack Perkins will serve as Jackson Wall's co-driver for Objective Racing. Remember, that was formerly the SCT Racing entry. And Tickford Racing Super 2 driver Ruben Goodall will partner with Thomas Randall in the Enduros in 2026. So there's your Supercars news, everything you need to know before this weekend's race. races. If you're a first-time viewer of Supercars, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. And if you have any more questions, again, feel free to let me know on social media or even in the comments on YouTube. But for now, let's go ahead and jump right on into the NASCAR news, because there's not a lot, but still a decent amount to discuss. First and foremost, prior to this weekend's Daytona 500, Jimmie Johnson announced that the 2027 Daytona 500, so next year's Great American Race, will be his final start in the Cup Series. However, the seven-time champion has said that he is not ruling out future starts in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series or the Craftsman Truck Series, but he did say the window on IndyCar is donezo. So anyone hoping that Jimmie Johnson would make one more shot at the Indianapolis 500, unfortunately, I have some bad news to say that that's not going to happen. But definitely some big news there for Jimmie Johnson. Also, in that announcement, he said that it'll be a fourth car. So they do intend to run a third car next season for Legacy Motor Club, and it won't be the 84 that Johnson will be in. That 84 is going to be the full-time car for a new third driver, and Johnson will drive some other number in his final Cup start. Meanwhile, going into the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, Carson Kvapil announced today that he will contest 4 races in the number 91 entry for DGM Racing. So that means his entire 2026 O'Reilly Auto Parts Series campaign is filled out, because he'll drive 24 races in his primary car for Junior Motorsports in the number 1. He'll race 5 races in the number 9, and then 4 in the 91 for DGM. Now that's again because sponsorship was not put together at the time when these announcements were made. Then sponsorship came forward, and Junior Motorsports had to work to get Kvapil into a full-time campaign again. But it looks like that has officially been announced. So even though he's going to be in 3 different cars in 2026, Carson Kvapil will still be eligible for the chase at the end of the regular season. Some big news if you're a fan of the Andretti family. Adam Andretti, the son of Aldo and Mario Andretti's nephew, will race 4 races in the Truck Series for Tricon Garage, driving their number 5 Toyota Tundra, and his first race will be this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. He will also race at St. Petersburg, at Watkins Glen, and at San Diego. So big news there for an Andretti, another Andretti making some NASCAR starts. Won't want to miss that. But also in the Truck Series, Ty Dillon was announced as the next driver of the free agent entry for Colleagues Ram truck. So Tony Stewart drove that truck at Daytona, and now Ty Dillon will race that truck in Atlanta. And finally, the last piece of NASCAR news here before we take our second and final break of the show is some big news that James Hinchcliffe, the mayor of Hinchtown, is going to make his Craftsman Truck Series debut. Not just his Craftsman Truck Series debut, but his NASCAR debut, period, at the truck race in St. Petersburg, which means that there will be 2 former IndyCar winners at St. Petersburg in the race, because he'll join Dario Franchitti, who's racing the number 1 Toyota Tundra for Tricon Garage in that race as well. So we'll get to see both. We'll get to see an Andretti and Adam Andretti. We'll get to see James Hinchcliffe, and we'll get to see Dario Franchitti mixing it up with the Truck Series regulars. I'm super excited for that. And of course, we don't know who's going to be in that Ram free agent entry, but now I'm really excited to see who's going to pilot that truck coming up here in a couple of weeks' time, when not only does the IndyCar season kick off, but then the Truck Series will have its first ever race on a street circuit. So lots to look forward to as we're coming up here on March and the latter part of February. This is the time to be a race fan, I tell you what, when everything's getting started and all that anticipation is here. But we got to take our final break of the show, because when we come back, we've got some breaking news out of the two-wheel world. And I know we don't usually cover two-wheeled news, but this is a very big development in the world of MotoGP. So you won't want to miss that. That's coming up after these messages right here on The Racing Report. And welcome back to The Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. Thanks so much for sticking with us through that break. Now, before we went to break, I did tease some breaking news in the world of MotoGP, and that is because we have just learned, it has just been confirmed as I'm recording this show within the last couple of minutes, that the series will move its Australian round from the historic Phillip Island circuit to the Adelaide Street Circuit for 2027, and that will mark the first ever time MotoGP has raced on a street circuit. Now, this is a big deal as the series has been at Phillip Island for the better part of 3 decades, and now Liberty Media is basically moving that race to the streets of Adelaide. And they're going to make that a big event coming up in 2027. Now, more details are expected to come out about this announcement in the coming days, but right now this is a huge development for every single two-wheeled fan in the world, basically, as I don't think that this is an almost borderline unprecedented move that we're seeing out of MotoGP, which again is owned by Liberty Media now, the same company that owns Formula One. So it's possible we could see more decisions and announcements like this if what we've already talked about this show about Formula One comes to fruition for MotoGP. Now, again, remember, I don't really talk about MotoGP on this show, and a lot of that's my fault. I just don't follow it maybe the way I should, especially since they stopped coming to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It's been kind of hard, and the constant changing in television partners, some being live, some being not, a lot of it being taped. It's kind of hard to follow here in the United States, but all I know right now is that this is the big story hitting the world of motorsports, is that MotoGP leaving Phillip Island for its first ever street race in Adelaide for Australia. So something we might keep up with the news later on, maybe we'll see. But yeah, definitely big news in the world of MotoGP. But as we talked about that, because I had to had to basically change the format a little bit. Now let's talk about the races that happened this past weekend, because boy, did we have an epic racing weekend. We had 4 different races in Daytona, starting with the Craftsman Truck Series race, which finished with a 4-wide finish. Chandler Smith ended up getting the victory. Gilles Ruggiero, who I thought was out of it, ended up just barely missing out on a super speedway win, in general, just a crazy race to say the least. Of course, unfortunately, Tony Stewart was caught up in an accident earlier in the race when Jake Garcia got loose out of turn 4 and collected Tony Stewart, so that was a bummer. And then for the other Hoosier that was in the race, Justin Haley, unfortunately, he ran out of gas on the last lap. So Stewart crashed, Justin Haley ran out of gas on the last lap, and Greg Van Alst, Anderson native, unfortunately failed to qualify. So not the best day for Hoosiers in Daytona, but nonetheless still a fantastic Truck Series race. And then we had the very next day at noon, the ARCA Menard Series race. Now, Gilles Ruggiero did get redemption by scoring the victory in that, though there was a lot of controversy given the fact that he did kind of take out 2 Nitro Motorsports cars in order to get that win, but not on the last lap. But anyway, not good. But he still got the win. Big deal there for him. He got the win after losing out by inches on Friday night. But then later that night, during the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race, Austin Hill did what Austin Hill does. Win on super speedways. Now, that's his 4th win at Daytona. That's crazy stat. And he's got 15 wins in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, and 11 of them are on super speedways. That is an insane stat. I am genuinely wondering how this guy does it. It can't just be luck. It can't just be the other drivers not knowing how to pass him or forgetting how to race in the last lap. It can't be that. This has to be luck-based, and I think that Austin Hill might be one of the best super speedway racers, at the very least in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series in the last several years. So congrats to him for getting that win. But then we had the Daytona 500, a thrilling race overall, unless you're not a fan of fuel saving, which was the major storyline pretty much throughout the majority of the middle part of the race. Now, there were some big accidents that did take out a lot of contenders in the race, and then, of course, you had the multiple accidents on the final lap that allowed Tyler Reddick to just barely squeeze by and score his first Daytona 500 victory, and it was also Michael Jordan's first Daytona 500 victory as a car owner. So now, how about this? MJ, he basically won. It's settled, but trial, the antitrust trial goes in his favor. Not long ago, just couple of months ago at the Brickyard, Bubba Wallace won the Brickyard, so that gave MJ his first ever crown jewel victory, and now he's got a second one in the Daytona 500. So how about that? If you're MJ, not too bad. But Tyler Reddick, obviously, that was a big win for him, especially in the aftermath of his infant son, his 9-month-old son, Rookie, battling that tumor in his chest. Thankfully, Rookie has made a full recovery and was able to celebrate, albeit, he's 9 months old, doesn't really know what's going on, but he was able to celebrate with his family in Victory Lane on Sunday, so just a great story out of that in general. But that wasn't the only race of the weekend. We also had Formula E in Jeddah. Race number 1 was won by Pascal Wehrlein, and race number 2 was won by Antonio Felix da Costa. Now, in addition to that, we also had the Bathurst 12-hour, which was won by Team GMR in their Mercedes AMG, and the pilots were Maro Engel, Michael Grenier, and Maxime Martin. But there were 2 major storylines in that race outside of the winner, and the first thing happened in the opening hours before the sun had even come up, when Chris Mies hit a kangaroo on the Conrad Straight early in the race, and he said he saw the animal at the last possible minute. Now, what's important to note there is after the race, other drivers complained about close calls with kangaroos, and it was a gruesome crash. The poor guy was covered in kangaroo blood. Just a very, very brutal crash, and unfortunate for the kangaroo as well. But then hours after that, you had a scary accident where Ralph Aaron broke his back after crashing into Johannes Zelger's stationary car, which after that car crashed on the approach to Forest Elbow. So this is basically right near the top of the Bathurst Mountain. And the controversy behind that is because Race Control didn't call a local yellow when that crash happened. They only called for the yellow and later red flag, which was a first in years, historic red flag, after the terrible accident in which Ralph Aaron broke his back. Now, he's calling for changes to race control, and as of the recording of this episode, I don't think we have any definitive changes that Race Control is aiming to make, but we will keep you up to date later on. Now, let's take a look at some of the races coming in this weekend. Obviously, NASCAR Cup, O'Reilly, and Trucks are in Atlanta, and then the Supercars are in Sydney with the Super 2 and the Super Utes as well. Race 1 in the Supercars is set for 3:50 a.m. Friday, that's Eastern Time, with race number 2 coming in at 3:35 a.m. Eastern Time on Saturday, and race 3 being at 12:05 a.m. on Sunday. So, a lot to look forward to this weekend, and again, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in this weekend. That is all for this week's episode of the Racing Report, but be sure to tune in next week where we're going to recap all those races, and again, as always, keep you up to date on the latest news and notes in the world of motorsport. So, for WTHR Plus, my name is Rob Peeters, and we are signing off after another episode of the Racing Report.